Cast your mind back to the 22nd of June, and you will remember Brazil absolutely thumping Peru 5-0. Then we would have thought that there's no way Peru were going to be in the final. We were always confident that Brazil were going to be there. Adam Chernoff, how did it happen? How were Peru in the final?
Well, they seemed to reinvent themselves against Chile yesterday, but as you mentioned, after that 5-0 loss, I think there was a little bit of doubt about them even progressing to the group final. It was pretty tight there with Japan and Ecuador, both in striking distance for that final third place spot. But then, sure enough, they survive on penalties against Uruguay and really put forth their best match aside from that New Zealand win that qualified them for the World Cup to get it done against Chile. And here we are, Brazil-Peru rematch in the final on Sunday. It's going to be fantastic. There's a lot to talk about.
Absolutely. And let's give a quick shout out to Mark O'Hare. Couldn't be here today as he's at a wedding in the Loire Valley in France. He tipped Peru to win it with us. It's kind of an outside bet, but he also tipped on WeLoveBetting.com, his regular articles there, Peru to make the final at 10.0. So props to Mark O'Hare. Big shout out there. Unfortunately, couldn't be with us today, but we're in good hands with Adam Chernoff. Let's look back at the semi-finals, first of all, before we dip our toes into Sunday night's game, Adam. I suppose, look, 2-0 to Brazil. Both of you guys fancy that one. But let's be honest here. I don't think anyone was fancying 3-0 win for Peru over Chile.
Absolutely not. I think, to be honest, like if we're really going to break these matches down, you have to think that both teams, to an extent, Peru and Brazil, got a little bit fortunate in both of those matches. They both lost the XG battle. They were certainly under pressure late in the second halves. It's being dubbed Copa VAR America, for all VAR has contributed in the matches, and it certainly stuck its ugly head out in the Argentina match where there were a couple questionable calls, a couple shots by Messi and Aguero. Both were off the bar, one off the crossbar, one off the post. So it's not like Argentina didn't have their chances against Brazil. And then Chile in the second half, I don't really remember more than a couple times where Peru touched the ball over half in the attacking third, aside from the Guerrero goal late in the match. So, I mean, it certainly could have played itself out the other way. Peru had 3 shots in that match. They scored on all 3. So when you're converting 100% of your shots on target, that's a pretty good outcome any match. So to an extent, both really faced some challenges in those matches, but ultimately Brazil played a very smart game plan. They got that early goal and then they sat way back and defended. So certainly the stats skewed a little bit there. And then Peru did much of the same, did some tactical things in midfield, which we can get to in a second, that were really clever by Gareca using the experience that he has throughout his team. So while they were both a little bit fortunate to get where they are, they certainly were deserving based on the game plans they put through. I thought both managers did a superb job at matching up against their opponent in the semis.
Absolutely. And like we said at the top of this broadcast, these two have previous, but let's have a look at the betting, because I want to kind of get your take on what has changed in the last 2 weeks since they played that 5-0 win, Brazil's victory. Let's have a look at the match odds. First of all, Brazil, to nobody's surprise, at 1.32. Peru, you can back at double figures at 12.5 currently here at Matchbook. 5.4 is the draw. The all-important handicap, which has already been a bit popular on Peru, plus 1.5. And you can currently back Peru at 1.84. Brazil at 2.1 minus a goal and a half. And the total is 2.5. And that's trending under right now. Currently, you can back under 2.5 at 1.86 and the over at 2.5. Adam, we talked off air about how the markets are so similar to the previous game. So, like, the 5-0 win that Brazil had against Peru essentially doesn't seem to matter to the market.
Well, yeah, that's exactly what you want to take away from this if you're a bettor. And I mean, the market will correct to where it needs to go, which, seeing as the price is the exact same in almost every single market except for the total goals market, where it's come down from 2.75 to 2.5, we're seeing almost the exact same prices as we saw back on the 22nd of June, which I think is very telling. And the thing you want to take away was Brazil is not as good as that 5-0 victory looked, and Peru is not nearly as bad. So we have to take it back to sort of a middle ground to accurately handicap this game. If you're handicapping Brazil at that high extent, you're going to be overpaying. And if you're handicapping Peru that badly, you're going to be missing out on some prices that already present some value in themselves. But there's a lot of little things we can take away. And I think the biggest was just prior to that match against Brazil, Peru lost Carlos Zambrano, their center back, which is absolutely enormous. He's been one of the best players for Peru this entire tournament, and he missed that match against Brazil. And then Chiche also revamped his lineup a little bit. If we think back against Bolivia and against Venezuela, he went with a little bit of a unique lineup. He didn't have Everton in the lineup. He didn't have Arthur in the lineup, and he was relying on a couple different guys. It wasn't that true striker that really emerged. And so he went forward and he put in Everton down on the wing. And then he also brought in Casemiro into the lineup, and he had Arthur as well. And that completely changed the dynamic in his team. And since making those changes and bringing Gabriel Jesus into the lineup, they haven't switched from that front four since. And that was the Peru match where this lineup took on a different turn. That's really where Brazil found their spark in this lineup, and everything really clicked for them. And so seeing as Peru was out without their main center back, they had to do some adjustments on defense. And then Brazil brings in this wild amount of speed on the wing. That's an enormous mismatch that's not going to be here for the final. Zambrano's back. Peru knows what's coming at them. They know how to adjust. And that surprise that Brazil had in that first match is not going to be there to catch Peru off guard early in the match like they did in the 22nd. So even though the prices are the same, I think this is really close to where the numbers should be in terms of evaluating these teams on a fair basis, if not a little bit biased to Brazil. And I was in favor of Peru back on the 22nd. Ended up going with the under and taking quite a beating on that myself. But I thought that the match was a little bit tighter than what those prices presented. So seeing the same numbers now with the lineups that we sort of anticipated before that Zambrano news back on the 22nd really makes a big difference, I believe, in this betting market coming up for the final on Sunday.
I want to ask you, but we touched on it prior to the knockout stages where Peru lost Farfan for the rest of the tournament, and I think yourself and Mark were obviously kind of even further down on Peru previous after the 5-0 loss, but it seems to be kind of addition by subtraction there for Peru minus Farfan.
Yeah, so Farfan, I mean, you have the age factor working against him to some extent. He's a big veteran presence in the midfield, but Peru takes on a completely different look when you bring in Carrillo and you bring in Flores on either side of Cueva. Cueva's sort of a natural central attacking midfielder. And when they had Farfan in the lineup, he took over that role and it pushed Cueva out to the wing. And he just didn't quite look comfortable in those couple matches where he was forced to play outside on the wing. Now you have three young guys in the attacking midfield playing behind Paulo Guerrero. And what they've been doing in the last couple matches, and what I thought they did really well against Chile, was they were all switching. So nobody was staying consistent, and it gave that Chile backline a lot of trouble, especially when there was any sort of pace in the buildup of the attack. The guys couldn't quite find their mark on defense and allowed Peru to have a lot of success moving the ball forward and create a lot of chances. In Peru, the media loves Flores. They say when he's on the pitch, good things happen. It's absolutely the case. He found himself in position for the opening goal against Chile yesterday night, and it really opened this game up for that midfield. But all four guys played extremely well, and it sort of allows Tapia and Yotun to sit back in front of the back four and give them a little more support. So even though there's a bit of a disconnect between the front four and the back six now, they all complement each other so well. And I think without Farfan in the lineup, it just brings a little bit more chemistry to this front four and allows them to be a lot more creative is really the big thing for me. And it's shown, certainly it finally came through against Chile once they had two matches together.
Let's talk about Brazil for a second, because you highlighted to me off air that probably what's becoming unnoticed is they're not really playing with a true number 9 right now. Is there avenues here for Peru to really do a kind of a stifling job on this Brazilian attack? Because we obviously know the strengths of the Brazilian rear guard. They haven't conceded a goal yet in this tournament. But are there enough question marks still about the Brazilian attacking game that Peru may just have a bit of an extra success?
Well, there's a couple spots we can point to throughout the tournament. Bolivia in that first half They got frustrated. The crowd got on them. I think that's going to exist in the finals to some extent. Against Venezuela, they got stuck. They couldn't find the back of the net in that match. A couple goals called back by VAR, but that is what it is. And then against Paraguay, and although Paraguay has a lot of size in the back line and just sort of ended up throwing themselves wildly throughout the air to block anything Brazil was trying to put on goal, they stifled them to an extent as well. So not only did we see Brazil get stuck with the old lineup they have, but we've also seen a case quite recently against Paraguay where they got stuck with this new lineup of Everton, Coutinho, Jesus, and Firmino up front. I think Peru, really what they have to do is be a little bit proactive. They had a lot of success being proactive against Chile. In that 5-0 loss against Brazil, they sat back in like a 4-4-1-1, but it was so deep and so conservative. I mean, you're not used to seeing Guerrero sit that far back. Like he was at times sitting inside the box while the ball was up at half. That's not what you want to see from Peru. That's not where they're going to have success. So I think that they have to push the matter a little bit. They don't have to be aggressive and get burned in counterattack and have Advíncula playing way up above half. But they do have to be proactive in at least keeping Brazil honest. And I think when that happens and Everton can't run wild down the wings, this team can get stuck. I think it's a very realistic possibility. Without Neymar, we've seen spots in this tournament where they put the ball into the penalty area and everyone's sort of looking around waiting for someone to finish it. And I don't think the answer in this match to win by multiple goals is just have Everton run around and do something crazy and take a long distance shot. It's worked for them in the past. It got them a win earlier in the tournament, but I don't think in the final, where Peru's going to be so much better prepared and so much more healthy, that's going to be the answer for Brazil in this one. So absolutely, they could find themselves in a situation where they get stuck just a little bit.
There are so many narratives in this game, Adam. Absolutely.
It's unbelievable.
Terrific amount of narratives. But let's get away from the narrative for a second and let's get back to the markets. I want to talk about the handicap first of all, because you kind of get the sense with these finals sometimes that there are teams that are under more pressure than others. Obviously, in this case, Brazil, the massive amount of expectation from the home fans. Peru potentially could, the pressure could be off there. And you look at a handicap line of 1.5, and it's unusual to see that in the final, Adam, because generally, the markets tighten up. People expect teams to tighten up accordingly. Is there value here with Peru getting 1.5 goals, Adam? To me, it just seems like a kind of an obvious one.
I think that there is at this price. I think it may be more beneficial to bet it late because we're going to see a lot of Brazil money probably enter the market and make this price a little more appealing. As you said, there's a ton of pressure on here at Brazil. There were rumors before the tournament that there may be managerial changes if Brazil doesn't get the victory. But you think the last couple times they've been on their home field trying to win a major tournament, and they fell out in spectacular fashion. This is the first major tournament final for Peru since 1975, long before I was walking this earth. So, I mean, it's been a very long time for this team, a very long time for this country. And you sort of saw what this meant to Peru following the victory over Chile. That was their Clásico Pacifico, or the two rivals going up against each other. That was an enormous victory over the weekend. So just to get to the final, to play Brazil in the Maracana, it's going to be enormous for Peru. I think putting all that alone, it's great to talk about the narrative, but just the way that this game could potentially match up, I really think Peru found something in that match against Chile. They made all those midfield changes going into the knockout rounds, and they couldn't really do anything against Uruguay in that match. They were pinned back for a lot of it. They didn't even get a shot attempt on target. But to see Gareca, who's, as we talked about many times in these videos leading up, he's got 21 of the 23 guys on the squad who have played minutes under him. He's got a lot of continuity, and he was tinkering, putting bits and pieces together throughout the tournament. And I think that this is the best lineup that he can put together. And I think that the market is not quite accurately pricing that into this game, because what you saw if you were watching really closely in that Chile game was a completely revamped Peru team that took on a completely different look and style of play. And like I said, the big thing here is they can be proactive with this front four. They can push Brazil back just enough. They're not going to dominate possession and control the game, but they can push them back just enough to be honest. And you're not going to have Brazil with their players and their average position. They're not going to have 10 guys on the other side of half for the majority of the game. That's just not going to happen in this game, especially after Peru gets burned. And I think that first match, the way that it went, was more beneficial for Peru than it was Brazil. Not at the time, but it allows them to prep a lot different. Because I said that big surprise factor of bringing in all that speed, that's been identified. And Gardeca's proven his game planning ability. He's certainly going to have an answer for that. And that's going to force Brazil to do something different, really, for the first time in 3 matches.
And the other side of the coin is, you beat a team 5-0. It's exceptionally rare that you have to play them again in a tournament later on in the stage. If you have beaten a team 5-0, the expectation levels of going from that, I mean, it's literally a can't-win situation for Brazil. But I really like the angle there, but I'm kind of also interested in this goal line, because I know you said late last night it opened at 2.75, but it's been knocked back into 2.5 currently. And we're seeing a lot of money for the under so far, big enough to drive it from 1.95 down to 1.86 in the last couple of hours. There's a definite move here, Adam. Are you with it?
Yeah, I think this is where the most value lies in the betting markets for this final. Since the knockout stages started, it's been consistently the market getting pounded with the under. The one exception to that was the Chile-Peru game last night, where the big difference with that was the pitch conditions. That was played in Porto Alegre and Gremio's stadium, Arena de Gremio, and there was pitch problems all tournament in that stadium. The coaches were on it, the managers were on it, the media was on it. And so the Brazilian grounds crew of the stadium, they worked really hard to get that pitch back up into good shape. And it played actually quite well for that match. So that market and how low it was sort of reflective of what was going on outside of the handicap on that with the pitch.
I was full sure that market was being knocked in because you and Mark had tipped the over, not the actual pitch improving.
Well, I mean, this video is doing quite well, so we probably had some support in that too. But luckily, everyone was able to cash in on that over too. Nonetheless, there was a lot of things going on behind the scenes that were affecting that price, which probably should have been higher. It didn't get there because it appeared that it was so good late, but we can push that to the side. The fact is that the unders have been getting hammered the last 6 or 7 knockout matches. These games just get so tight, and there's such an emphasis to either push it to extra time or push it to penalties in the first round of the quarterfinals, that these teams where there's a big mismatch like there is here in terms of pricing, the underdog, in this case Peru, there's been a lot of success in slowing down the attack of the opposing team and taking it right to the end, keeping it competitive. I'm not going to sort of focus on what Peru can do defensively. I think we saw something really interesting from Brazil when they played Argentina. And maybe it's the pressure getting to Brazil. Maybe it's Chiche having to push out a result and get something favorable to keep his job. But once they got that early goal against Argentina, Brazil really sat back. If you look overall, they only had 5 shot attempts in the entire match. They scored on 2 of their 4 shots on target, but efficiency was the key for Brazil rather than sort of what we're used to with them stifling teams and pushing them back for the full 90 minutes. That match against Peru, even with the penalty, Brazil only generated just above 3 expected goals. And while those numbers will definitely affect the market, I think the key takeaway there was the individual mistakes from Peru that opened up opportunities for Brazil. It's not like Peru as a team played extremely poorly. They had individuals on the back line and in the midfield that just made brutal mistakes. You look at Galesian goal. I mean, that was one of the worst blunders you're ever going to see. If you haven't seen it, check out YouTube. That was embarrassing. And that really tipped everything over for Peru. So not only is Brazil slightly conservative in what I'm watching from them, especially against Argentina, I think we could well see that translate over. Peru's going to be playing to avoid the early mistake. That's where Brazil really thrives. So if Brazil can play a little bit more compact defensively, especially early on, and Brazil can't get that early goal, then it becomes a case of Brazil not wanting to give up that lazy opportunity encounter, which they were trying to prevent the whole game against Argentina, and they couldn't do it to an extent and got a little bit fortunate with how that ended up. Peru's not going to have the same attacking efficiency Argentina had, But what really interests me is how Brazil took their foot off the gas. And I think we see that repeat here in the final against Peru, especially if they get a goal around the 25, 30-minute mark. We're probably going to see things ease up just a little bit and tighten up that much further. So I do think there's certainly value on under 2.5 goals in this match.
From betting terms, how do you play this? So do you have, do you have maybe 70% of your bankroll on the 2.5, and then maybe take a 30% on the +1.5, or are you going to go 100% under 2.5?
Well, it's not put 70% of the bankroll. I don't love it that much, but if I'm putting the stake aside, I know. I'm giving you a hard time this morning.
70% of your bankroll for this game, not your entire bankroll. I probably didn't clarify that well, though.
Yeah, exactly. So I would probably split it up. I mean, you can even go 50-50 with 50 on the handicap +1.5, 50% on under 2.5. I think that's a nice way. I think the under, that price is not going to hold as long as what the handicap is going to hold. So this is the case where you probably want to bet the under sooner rather than later, and then try grab the handicap late, because I think we'll see some Brazil money enter the market, make this price a little bit more appealing for anyone looking to take Peru on the handicap. Okay,
some pretty sage advice from Mr. Adam Chernoff. Adam, the Copa America has been an absolute pleasure chatting to you and Mark O'Hare. I'm pretty sure it's about 9 or 10 Sundays to the NFL. How excited are you, by the way? I'm really excited.
Yeah, just over 60 days to go. Jets report to training camp on the 24th of July. All the other teams between the 17th and the
30th. No. Don't. Let's finish this podcast on a high. Let's not talk about the New York Football Jets. We'll leave it there at that, because you and I will start talking about the Jets at the end of this broadcast, and it'll probably just be a bit of a waste of time for everyone else listening. But I do want to give you our thanks for Matchbook and from our listeners. You've offered some great analysis, Mark, as well, of course, and we'll see you in the new season. And don't forget, folks, if you do want to get involved in the Copa America final for the Maracana on Sunday night, check out offer.matchbook.com for a £10 risk-free bet. Maybe try Peru, 12.5. You never know.